We all know the story of Ed Gein and the horrors he had committed. But do we know why? In this video, we won't be reviewing Ed himself. Instead, we're going to focus on his mother, Augusta Gein. Hi, my name is Janine, and I'm here to do the research so you don't have to. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button so I know I'm doing things right. If I'm not doing things right, then still hit the subscribe button, but let me know in the comments what I'm doing wrong. With that being said, welcome to Now You Know. Paranoid schizophrenia is a mental disorder that causes people to have auditory hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, disorganized thinking, social withdrawal, and difficulty functioning, such as being able to hold down a job or in some cases even being able to live on their own. Ed Gein was known to have been suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. The three factors that play a role in the development of this disorder would be genetics, brain structure, and the environment in which the person lives. Keep that in mind as we continue on. Augusta Wilhelmine was born on July 21, 1878 in Crosse, Wisconsin. She was raised in a strict religious household and was extremely close to her father. During her childhood, she was taught to study the Bible, and she took certain parts of it very seriously. She was under the impression that sex was a disgusting and vile act, and its only purpose was for procreation. Unfortunately, the story of how Augusta met and fell in love with a man named George Gein had been lost over time, with the exception of the fact that they were married on December 11, 1900, in Hamburg, Wisconsin. George Gein drifted from job to job, sometimes working as a carpenter, an insurance salesman, a railroad worker, and somewhere along the road, he picked up the skills to be a tanner of animal hides. This was a skill he passed on down to Edward, and Edward definitely found uses for it later on in life. Now, George was known to be a very heavy drinker, but he was a smooth-talking gentleman who carried himself very well. Most people found him pleasant to be around, except for his wife, Augusta. You see, she thought alcohol use was just as sinful as sex itself, so this was not a happy marriage from the very beginning. George would drink, and Augusta would deny sex. At some point, though, Augusta gave in, and only simply for the fact that she wanted a child, and the only way to get one was to perform that vile, sinful act of intercourse. So on January 17, 1901, Henry Gein was born. The baby, unfortunately, did not add much joy to the couple's marriage, as George was still drinking heavily and not able to hold down a steady job. It was then that Augusta came up with the plan to have George open their own small grocery store. Of course, Augusta ended up doing most of the work, as George was still not able to get his act together. Over the years, Augusta really started to develop a hatred for men. She thought all men seeked fornication and adultery, living nothing but sinful lives. It worried her that she even had a son. This caused her to desire to have a daughter. She felt a daughter would be easier to raise, and they wouldn't need to be pushed so hard for sobriety and obedience. So Augusta forced herself into that dirty, horrible act once more, and on August 27, 1906, Edward Theodore Gein was born. Augusta was devastated when she found out that she gave birth to yet another boy. She was determined to raise him properly. Ed and Henry would not grow into lustful, swearing, foul-mouthed creatures who would use women's bodies in the worst possible ways. She vowed that her children would be completely free of sexual sin. In 1914, the Gein family moved away from La Crosse and to a farm in Plainfield. The farm was 195 acres and was equipped with everything the family would need, including a chicken coop. Augusta loved the fact that the farm was far away from town. This gave her the ability to isolate her young boys from the temptations that Plainfield offered. She believed the town ran rampant with sinful activities. Unfortunately for her, sending her beloved boys to school was a requirement by law that she had no way to get around. The boys tried hard in school to make friends, but every time they would find a connection, Augusta would find a reason for them to have to end it. As time went on, the marriage between George and Augusta deteriorated further and further. They would get into a heated argument about George's drinking, and Augusta would become more and more restrictive, using her religious beliefs as a way to manipulate and control the family. This caused divorce to not be an option either. Poor George, no wonder he drank so much. Every day after school, Augusta would read to the children from the Bible, in another attempt to ensure that they understand the sin that came with lust. She would tell her children that in order for them to remain loyal to her, they must remain virgins themselves. Sex was the ultimate sin, and it would lead them right into the hands of Satan himself if they ended up giving in to the desire to be with a woman. On April 1st, 1940, George finally was able to find a way to get away from Augusta. At the age of 67, he passed away and was laid to rest in Plainfield Cemetery in Wisconsin. Despite Augusta's twisted views and influence that she pushed on the children all of their lives, Henry still fell in love. He desired to be with a divorced woman who had 2 children from a previous marriage. Now you know Augusta must have loved that. But Henry didn't care. Not only was he planning on leaving the farm to be with this woman his mother did not approve of, he also started to criticize Augusta for her beliefs and for the torment that she was putting onto Ed. In 1944, right before Henry was planning to move out, he and Ed were burning brush on the farm. Ed reported that the fire got out of hand and had separated the men. When the fire died down, Henry was found to have perished. No autopsy was performed on him, as they assumed he had died from smoke inhalation, but he did have a big gash on the back of his head. Over the years, people have speculated that Ed had killed Henry. Now, I'd like to stick with the facts, but I'm going to throw my 2 cents in here. I think Augusta was furious with Henry for going against her. I'm willing to bet she told Ed that Henry was damned and under the influence of Satan. I think it's likely that she instructed Ed to have Henry taken out. Like I said, that is my own opinion, but I'd like to know what you think as well. Let me know in the comments. After Henry's death, Ed was left alone with his mother. At some point, she suffered a stroke, and Ed had become her sole caretaker. Only God knows what happened between the 2 of them during that time frame. Eventually, she suffered another stroke and passed away in 1945. Now, Ed was alone. His entire family was gone. Other than working a few odd jobs and occasionally babysitting, he didn't have much of a social life. I really don't think he even knew how to have one. He was a recluse, and he's used to being isolated, but now he was completely and utterly alone, except for the voices in his head. Ed missed his mom the most. He felt like he lost a part of himself when she had died. He wanted her back. He needed to feel complete again. He really had to find a way to bring her back to life. That is when Ed had a very bad idea. Now you know the entire story. Do you feel Ed was all that evil? I will be honest, I feel bad for him. Yes, what he did was wrong, but don't you think his mother and father is actually more responsible for how he turned out? I think it's pretty clear that his mom had some sort of mental disorder. And didn't we say at the beginning of the video that paranoid schizophrenia can be carried down genetically? And couldn't it also be developed later in life depending on the environment someone was raised in? If you ask me, Ed Gein was dealt a very bad hand. That's it for today, guys. I'm off to watch Psycho. For some reason, I'm just in the mood. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and thanks for listening.